All right, I'm very conscious people have given up their lunch breaks and whatnot to join us. So I will just start off. And before I start any further, I'd like to acknowledge that we are here today on the land of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people who traditionally occupied the Sydney coast. On behalf of Wellbeing Australia and our broader community, I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people attending today and viewing later after this event, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome all and thank you for joining us. I am truly excited about today's session and closing our presentation and panel series this year with such a critical and personal conversation that I think is of immense value to our first responders and their families and community. So I'm Catherine Taylor, I'm one of the directors of Wellbeing Australia, and just wanted to share with you a little bit more about us if you haven't worked with or known of Wellbeing Australia before. We're a not-for-profit, so we're not connected to any agency, we're not connected to any government, and we are completely neutral in terms of our funding. So we can really provide what the community is sharing with us as being important in a neutral and impartial way. Our focus is very much on positive, proactive strategies to support you and your well-being throughout life's changes. And we really acknowledge there's some fantastic resources in our community for all different needs, for challenges around your well-being. Our focus is how can we offer you solution-focused and approaches that will help you in those times of need, but also help you reflect and prepare when life is going well. So it's all about that continuation. Today, we're at our First Responder Summit, and it has very much come from the feedback from attendees from our last year's series and the conversations we've had since around what's important to our first responder community. Before we move into our session, it's important to note that when we're speaking about first responders, we are speaking about people who are in paid and unpaid roles, so full-time, part-time, casual, any capacity, but also volunteers, family, peers, community broadly. And with the significant issues that we are facing at the moment, it's certainly important that we take care of our community who are stepping up as first responders without the training that many of you will have had. When we're looking at that wellbeing strategy, we're talking about you living well. And that's through being able to be connected with yourself and what's important to you, also with those around you, having hope for a better future, and really understanding that community network and support and importance to you. As we go through today's session, we are here for you, so please pop into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen any questions, any stories, anything that is of importance to you so we can make sure we provide some insights or answers. Our panel are here for you, so please share where your connection is with first response, why you wanted to join today, and anything that you would like to have answers to. The Q&A is anonymous, so no one else will know, and you can make sure that that is targeted through. If you do pop anything in the chat, it will go public if you leave it to everyone. So just like you to know that from that side. So today's session is the flow through of a lot of discussions we've had around what are those impacts on our well-being, what are the challenges, and what do we do when we know that space is not working for us anymore. We've had conversations in the last few days about our motivation and drivers, about our values and our purpose, and about really understanding when things are not working. Sometimes when things are not working, a transition or a change of career is a good opportunity. And we had a lot of feedback, very, very strong feedback throughout the community that we often don't know how to start that process or what to do to support us in being able to find that next step. So today we're talking very much about those career transitions after crisis, and that may be personal or it may be trauma-based in what we've experienced. And we have two fantastic speakers joining us from two very different perspectives, which is brilliant. So we have Inspector Allyson Fenwick. Allyson, I'm guessing you're happy to be Ally today?
Yes, hello, I'm happy to be Ally. No need to salute, it's just Ally, and I'm here to support people making a transition. Like you said, it could be after something personal that's happened to them, or it could be something after a physical injury or a psychological injury.
Perfect. And as we can see, Ally is in police. Been in police for a long time and in a number of different roles. So she's going to be able to help us get some insight into what's happening from the police perspective in terms of what they're doing, but also with those people she's been near and dear to. And then we have Desleigh White. Desleigh, you have a wealth of experience locally and overseas in that HR transition and a number of personal sort of experiences in this. So we welcome you as well to us today.
Thank you very much. And I, on the other hand, am happy to be saluted.
I'll salute you.
All right. Well, maybe just for perspective, because it's so important for us to understand why everyone's joining this series and this conversation. Ali, what is it that has interested you? Why are you keen to talk about this topic?
So I have been the manager of deployment and transition with New South Wales Police Force for the last 3 years. And it was a role that was thrust upon me without me really knowing much about what it meant. And so I've come along this journey and I've discovered this real need and gap for people to think about their careers. And sometimes when they have to navigate an injury or a challenge, we're very unprepared for it. So I'm hoping that by talking about this more broadly to other first responders and other HR experts, that we can all respect the difficulty and work together to provide numerous solutions to people, because there is just not one solution. It's a very, very individual. It's a very, very individual challenge. But yeah, so 26, maybe almost 27 years in the police, joined very, very young, and it's the career I've ever known. But something about me made me feel like I needed to be prepared for a change, because it is a difficult role. We see difficult things, we do difficult things, and I don't think you can continue to do that your whole life. And just having that backup plan has been really important. So just here to share and help other people along the journey.
Beautiful. Thank you. Desleigh.
Well, Catherine, I think one of the experiences that I bring that I think is really important for this community is my 8 years at RSPCA New South Wales and Queensland. And, you know, that just encompasses your entire life. You're volunteering on weekends, you're taking animals home to foster them, you're spending a lot of time at work with colleagues. And so when I left there after 8 years, it was like a piece of my life was missing, because it had just been a part of my identity. And so I can approach the conversation today knowing the experience that I had in leaving that organisation or those organisations, but also from a personal front. I have experienced a couple of episodes of depression, and I've also had some significant trauma in my personal life. And so I think that gives me a sense of compassion for others who have difficult experiences. And certainly within my time at RSPCA, we did pre-employment medicals there, and this is sort of things that I've spoken about previously, so I'm not breaching confidentiality or anything, but our pre-employment medicals demonstrated that on the spectrum of mental health, from good health to ill health, 90% of people, roughly, I didn't actually do the true numbers, but roughly 90% of people were coming to us with pre-existing ill health areas. And so it's been a huge part of my career supporting people in that way.
It's interesting you mentioned that, and both of you are coming from a lens of different experiences. So often when people think of first responders, they think of the badge, the uniform, the front line. They forget all of the organizational structure that's behind there. And I think that you mentioned, Desleigh, about ill health, the last 3 years, particularly the consistency of the trauma globally that everyone is facing is on top of, right? And so people have had severe personal traumas. They may have had work-based. Ali, you mentioned those things that we see over and over and over. A theme we had come through a lot in our discussions with a lot of the guys who joined last year and agencies was police feeling like, without my gun, I don't exist. And so that's where I think we really need to reframe and help people understand those other options. So I guess a question to you guys, when we're in first response, whether we are volunteering, we often get a lot of family members trying to support their partner or their child or whoever it might be in finding hope for that next step. we don't see that actually first responders bring this whole new skill set and approach. We see it as a siloed role. Maybe, Ali, if you can kick us off, why should other agencies or companies, industries be open to first responders?
Yes, firstly, I just want to quickly touch on something Desleigh said about the organisation accepting people into other organisations when there's that acknowledgement that there's been a pre-existing condition, because it's one of the biggest fears police have as they transition, that the stigma is real when it comes to some being psychologically impacted by things. So it's great to hear that's happening. But I believe that the reason we should value first responders, whoever they are, in whatever role they're in, is we are charged to run towards a danger. We're responsible for responding to something that no one else usually wants to deal with, whether it be a sick animal, an injured person, a violent confrontation. That's not for everyone. And some people are quite happy to step back and say, I'll leave that to the experts. And we are the experts in those challenging circumstances, and that's what we're trying to do. And we quite comfortably and willingly move towards those on a daily basis, sometimes unimpacted by it. But at a certain point in our career, I think that it's normal to also be impacted momentarily, have a reason to recover and reflect and pull yourself together and move on to that next role. And I think it's not pushing those feelings down that we need to accept in these roles is important. So it's that exposure to something traumatic occurs in lots of different occupations, not just the police, but the risk is greater for first responders. We are exposed to more trauma than the everyday person. And it's, I think, as HR professionals supporting this cohort of people, there's a lot we can learn to help them make the career moves that sometimes they need to make, because the career or the role is just something that they're not comfortable doing.
I would add to that I think we have two issues here. Firstly, we have the issue that people, and certainly I've been guilty of it in the past, I'm an HR person, Joe Average, so to speak, but I think we do have preconceived ideas about people. And I vividly remember giving someone who was ex-Defence Force feedback. He was facilitating some sessions for us, and I took him aside afterwards and said, "Dude, you're just not in the Defence Force anymore. Chill, relax, have a laugh, have a joke, sit down, don't stand over people." So I guess we need to recognise our biases, and we need to have conversations about them. So there's the bias of, are people going to be giving us orders? Because that's a culture kind of thing that we perceive that they've come from. And I use perceive deliberately. But the second thing is the pre-existing conditions. People do have biases about that. I think what we need to do, though, is focus on what skills does this person bring with them? Because we're talking about a group of incredibly skilled people, and potentially incredibly resilient people, given the level of trauma and experiences that they come with.
So you mentioned there some really good points about our bias, and that unconscious bias is such a big piece of what's happening from an organisational perspective. So I'm keen to tap in to help everyone who's joined understand personally what they can be doing. But before we do that, can you guys maybe give us an understanding, if I'm an organisation and I'm HR or a senior leader who's sitting here now thinking, oh, actually, maybe I do hold some of those biases. How could I approach engaging first responders in different agencies, different roles within my own space?
There's not really a magic recipe to do that. It's simply just becoming aware that it exists and opening your mind to the possibility that there is skills that other people can bring to the organisation. And I know the police are looking at cross-government sector trials to try and look before even someone is recovered enough to take another career move, letting people trial in roles to give them that confidence to work in a similar government agency where there is a bit of structure to support them and to also help them understand if the role is right for them, because we're so concerned about our image sometimes that we don't feel like we can be vulnerable and have a conversation with someone about how something's not working for fear that it ruins our opportunities to then land a role. And I know that social media has put the spotlight on what we all do recently. I mean, even today, floods are going on around us while we're trying to discuss career moves that people might have to make in the future. So that's also acting, I suppose, as a little bit of a barrier in some fronts, but it's also an opportunity because we can instantly see the value that first responders bring. We can see them rescuing people in the floods, and we can see them abseiling and diving in and making decisions and leading them under pressure. Like, they're fantastic skills for most employers. You just have to open your mind to how transferable they can be into different roles.
Yeah, and I think we need to look at the language we use, because you're right, Ali. They're diving into floodwater, they're rescuing people, etc. But in my business where I am right now, I don't need someone with those skills. So it's about the language we use. It's about how the first responder or the person applying for the role, the candidate, how they want to position those skills and sell those skills in language that is very plain language, no acronyms, no, police language for your group. And that's just by way of example.
So before we tap in, I'm really keen to gather your insights on more of those actual skills that people may not see in themselves, because we're usually our worst supporter when we come to looking for work. Is we're very good at helping everyone else as individuals, but we won't put that same focus on ourselves. So if we come back to that crisis space and the reality of the environment that you've both touched on that we're working in at the moment, as I said, we're, as an organisation, keen for people to be more proactive in managing their well-being. And one of the key indicators of our well-being is our purpose, which falls back to what we do for our living and the bulk of our time, yet we don't prioritise it. So understanding and seeing the severity and, I believe, the growth in mental health challenges, in PTSD, in people being forced into transitions because of restructures or whatever it might be. What do you, from your experiences, either personally or with others in your sphere, what are those moments of time where people should go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I should be thinking of, or maybe I need to step into starting to consider what could be a different path or a future for me before we get to that end stage we're trying to avoid? Desleigh, maybe you could share from your side and your experience there.
I think that's a really hard thing to do. And certainly when I was at RSPCA, I came really close to burnout, like teetering on the edge of burnout. And it was really difficult to pull myself back from that. I like to think of people having, teams of people around them. And so, it might be friends, it might be family, it might be trusted work colleagues. So people who you give permission to speak openly and, potentially harshly with you. I had a conversation with my managing director today about my work hours. And he said, well, as long as you know that I'm going to call you out on it if there's something to be called out on. And my comment to him was, I would be disappointed in you if you didn't. But I think those conversations actually have to be said. They can't be left unsaid. You need to be clear with people about, hey, this is my concern, I'm feeling this way. And that's a really hard conversation for most people to have.
I was talking to Desleigh earlier about the plan to get from A to B. And when you maybe are getting some gut feelings that you can't continue, you're not bouncing back. As we know, resilience is that ability to bounce back. You're not bouncing back as well as you used to. I think we need to listen to ourselves and recognise that it might not be good to be in this role or in this organisation. And there is a great provider that talks to me often about the importance of being connected to the role that you're in, but also to the organisation that you're in. And if it doesn't feel aligned, it's going to continue to be hard. So if you want to get some improvement in your well-being, and that's what we're all trying to do, that's the first step. But then getting from here to here requires planning, and it requires knockbacks. It requires reflection on what skills you have and how you are presenting them to prospective employers. And you can't just walk in and do that without being prepared. But I think the more times you put yourself out there, the more you grow, the more you learn, and the closer you get to landing something that's going to suit you in your next chapter. And I say chapter because it's not the end of the book here. You might get here and this all works well, but then something else happens in life and this no longer feels right. So you've got to move again. We're just hardwired and built to stay comfortable and warm and safe. And it's not natural to kind of step out of that zone. But when you do, you realize that there is a freedom and a happiness and a satisfaction that you didn't realize because you were too busy focused on, I can't get out of this. It's such a crisis for me. But that's the hope, I think, that exists.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that head down focus is usually where we're at. I just need to get through. I just need to get past. If I just make it to, there's milestones in everyone's life. If I'm just getting married, if I'm having children, if I've got aging parents, whatever my dynamics are, we tend to go, well, I'll just get to and I'll just get past. But in that, we're delaying focusing on ourselves or recognizing that feeling that this is not working. And there's been several sessions where we spoke about moral injury and about values alignment, and that connection that PTSD and moral injury are two very, very different things, but come back to that feeling that actually where I am and what I'm doing no longer aligns with me. Yeah, it's not that it's bad or the people are bad, or it's just not fitting with me anymore. So a question's come through from the room, and Ali, I might ask you this just to start off with, being in uniform, is will leaving a position after like burning out, actually being in a burnt out state, affect my next role?
I would say no, but I would caveat it with, you have to first be comfortable with why you've left or why you can't stay in that role and where you're going. And that's the unpacking of your own values and your own acceptance of where you're at. I find if you're not accepting that point, that place, then you can't convince someone that you are ready to offer skills to another organisation. Your ability to listen, your ability to manage briefs of evidence or paperwork administration tasks that you did here, you can also do there. So no, it doesn't. I think it comes back to the stigma exists and is real about people with mental illnesses and injuries, but in being brave enough to have a conversation about what you require is no different to helping the person who can't walk up the stairs because they're in a wheelchair. Most employers are not going to just, be disappointed that they have to help that person. I think employees have a much broader view now of the importance of that variety of thinking we get from people of all different cultures, women, men, nationalities. That diverse thinking is not just narrow. It's also about the perspectives that you've had and experienced in your previous work and how you can bring them with fresh eyes to a new employer. I don't know, Desleigh, what do you think?
Look, I'm going to use examples to answer that question. And the first example is back in about 2000. So there you go, I've dated myself, right? I was in a job that just was so not aligned with my values. It was diabolical. And I just really, I was there for 3 months and I pretty much burned out in 3 months. It was that bad. And so I left, and to pay the bills, I took a job through just one of the admin-y kind of recruitment companies for temporary assistance. And I ended up being I refer to it, the travel chick for Franklin's. Who knew that Franklin's needed someone full-time to do travel? There you go. Now, that's not on my resume. It's not part of my career, but it gave me time and space. And I think that's a potential option for people. Remember, this doesn't have to be your final move in your career. It doesn't even have to be a strategic move in your career, as long as it's going to be good for you. The second example I will give is not me. I was a hiring HR person, and I was approached by someone in an organisation not dissimilar to the work that Ali and her team do, but it wasn't Ali and her team. And it was for a person who had PTSD as a result of being a first responder. And my immediate reaction was, no, just no, this is not going to work. But rather than just sit with that reaction and close the doors, I had a conversation with the organisation who approached me. And so we talked very openly. We talked about my concerns. We talked about the person, what they had going on. We ended up meeting with the person, and we ended up hiring them. And they were amazing. They were incredible at their job. And so for the HR people out there, I would really encourage you to not assume that someone who has PTSD or any other condition is a definite no, because we can't know that until we meet with them, and we can't know that until we understand them. And you know what? I'm not a psychiatrist, so I just can't know that, full stop.
And I would say also, for the person that's concerned that their burnout or what they experience there is going to prevent them from another job, maybe that organisation and the cultures of that organisation aren't the right fit for you if you can't be yourself. And of course, we have to be professional, and we don't, there's a time and a place to share those intimate personal challenges. But I think we're not obliged to, pass on all that information. We're just obliged to be true to ourselves and do our job to the best of the ability.
And everybody comes with something, right? The world is complex, and humans, we are, we do give too much and we do get involved. So sometimes our view is that we are perceiving these things worse than others, and totally agree with both of your points that if we can't have the conversation, maybe that's not the right organisation for me. Maybe that's not the right place. There's a couple of questions come through. So anyone in the room who does have other questions, please share, and we can make sure we add them as we go. We're about halfway through. But one of the questions is, when you're saying those skills, what are you talking about? How do I start to understand what my skills are? So how do you recommend people start to think less of the badge or the role and more about the skills they bring? And maybe, Ali, you can kick us off, because you've been doing a lot of this in your world. How can you help someone start at that beginning point?
Look, it's actually really quite a scientific process. But the first thing I would say is get a good career coach, or get someone who is, it's their specialty to help you navigate your careers. I have this little book here. I'm just going to hold it up here, Navigating Career Crossroads. And Jane Jackson is someone who has worked with the police, and she wrote this book. But it's for $20. It's my go-to for like tips and advice and guidance on your resume, and but taking you right back to your values. Work all that out. Spend time jotting down those things. This is the preparation that's required for you to build the building blocks to be able to confidently take that step. Even then, preparing for interview, you need to have done this little bit of work first to give yourself the best chance of success. That doesn't mean you can't walk in, wing it, and land a job on your first try. But if you haven't practiced, if you haven't researched and looked at what the organisation is looking for, and then taken what you have and worked out how you can present it to them, it's going to be harder to make that match. So my advice, plan, get that career coach or career advisor or Google or preparation well underway at every stage to position you best.
And having those conversations, that's usually where things make more sense, isn't it? Having that coach, having that support network is where we go, oh, so that is useful. Oh, I never thought of it like that. Oh, but I just do. We assume what we do is a given. And for some reason, we think everybody does the same thing as us. So we do forget to put that value on ourselves. Desleigh, you've worked across so many industries and so many different roles. What would you say are some of the skills that people are looking for or that they could reflect on in themselves?
I'm always talking to hiring managers about, we can teach someone technical skills. We can teach them how to do whatever the role requires in a technical sense. What we want is the human skills. And so when most people call them soft skills, I hate that phrase because they're actually hard. So skills like negotiating, skills like diffusing conflict. So if I use a police example, which I have no credibility in doing, right? But if I use a police example, going to a household where there's domestic violence, you have skills in conflict resolution. If you are talking between two parties who, one stole a car and it's caught on fire on the Harbour Bridge yesterday, if you're talking to those people, you're diffusing conflict or you're negotiating in terms of who has done what, said what, etc. So have a look at some of the human competency skills that are out there, and they're generally listed in ads as well. They'll have a bunch of the technical things, they'll have the degrees, but they'll also have the human skills.
Something I find first responders forget is you're working in a very highly regulated industry. This is an industry where you can't just go ad hoc and do whatever you want. There's processes to follow and there's systems that need to be utilized, which I find generally that means you've got quite a logical process to working things through, a respect for that, which is really important in so many industries now more than ever, and quite a methodical approach. The other sort of skills that I see is it is that compassion. So I've seen people move between agencies, but also out into like aged care, healthcare, those sorts of things, where I'm able to keep feeling like I'm supporting. I've had a number move into teaching recently, actually. And it's that whole, I'm still giving back to the community, but I'm doing it in a way where I feel that there's a bit of an impact that I can take ownership of.
Yeah, I would add as well, Catherine, attention to detail. Most job ads require attention to detail, and those things that you've just been talking about, the legislation, all of that sort of thing goes to attention to detail. I think the example that comes to mind for me recently, a friend told me that he was doing some career coaching with his brother-in-law, who is ex-police. And he's got no qualifications as a career coach, but he can translate what his brother-in-law is saying into commercial language. And sometimes that's all you need, is just that trusted person. Or, we talk about bankers not admitting that they're bankers at barbecues, right? Sometimes HR people, we don't admit that we're HR people at barbecues, but I'll guarantee that everyone knows someone who knows an HR person. Reach out, use your network.
It's so true. Just don't leave it to you yourself, because it is through conversation and through starting that process. So that network language that we use in HR quite a lot of people that have been in roles, and Ali, we were talking before about the difference in longevity in different roles, and first responders do tend to stay in their area or their agency for a long time. Do you find that as well?
Definitely. I'm guilty. Mind you, when I was young, I had 4 or 5 different casual jobs, and I really think it positioned me to that place where I felt like I needed a backup plan. So I did a degree on the side. That's my backup plan. If I get jaded and twisted, I'm going to leave and go and do business in the corporate world. Haven't got there yet, which is a good sign, but the backup plan was there.
It doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's where I'm at this point, and time just vanishes, right? And there's a comment that's come through that the absolutely love that attention to detail comment, that often people see it as a negative, but it's a massive positive, right? It's a compliment that someone can do that. And I think that is something we notice in more agency space, or that first response is, people have told me this is a bad skill, so I don't want to promote it. So starting to see everyone's skills are actually not bad. It's how you're getting to utilize them and embrace them.
If you had to apply for your own job in the police and you looked at your job description, which we don't usually do because we've already got our job. That's where I would start, in understanding where your skills are. And the police have recognised the importance of the capability framework in providing more alignment to those broader skills, delivering results, people management. Oh my gosh, I was just writing them down before, but the business enablers, they're all categories of skills that we use every day. And if you start with, if you're not yet sure what your move is going to be, and you're just maybe quietly sitting and reflecting on what step to take your own resume and think about the job you're in and what you're really good at, and also what you're passionate about. And from there, you start to get used to the language that's aligned to a job. And then you start to look at where you want to go. And if there's something really clear that, like someone really wanted to do property management that was going through a need to move out of the police, and their skills with strata and the legislation work, it all came quite naturally for them, and they landed a job in property management. We're kind of aligned with social services, and there's just so many opportunities to continue to contribute to the community and feel the satisfaction that we've felt in our careers when we were responding first responders. And it's not all about chasing down and catching the criminal in the policing career, where there are lots of options to within the police and across the police, and those skills are applicable in many, many organisations.
Catherine, can I just go back to your comment about length of service? Because I think often we, certainly in HR, we look at people who've been in, say, police for 20 years and we think, oh, they can't change. But in fact, their job every day is change. Their job every day is varied. And so it's about making sure that the candidate is, or the person applying for the job, is telling the person reading their application, I have varied skills. I have, I've had diverse roles in the police, for instance. Every day has been different. I can adapt to change. It's really important that the candidate draws those links for the person reading their application.
Absolutely. And I want to come to some of those to help people get some tips and tools of how they can write that application or approach that. Just two examples that have come through. One is someone who's feeling extremely anxious and so not wanting to be in a people fronting role at the moment. So it has been in that role, which is very much around community, but now, particularly with the COVID dynamic, feeling very unsafe in that space. So needing to readjust there. And another that has a physical injury due to service in emergency. So what pathways, and you've mentioned a few, Ali, you mentioned a few as well. What pathways would you say are accessible to those sorts of people? Who wants to kick us off?
I'm going to kick it off with whoever asked that question. I don't know who you are, but understanding who you are and what you love to do is the answer to the pathway. I used a Berkman analysis to do a bit of a deep dive into my own personality and how I behave under stress and how I naturally behave, and when, in a way I've learned to behave, because we do have to also comply. But what I have worked out is that I'm very aligned to music, and I've aligned to management, I'm aligned to security and things like this. But what I'm not aligned to is manufacturing and financial work. So some people love numbers, some people are more creative. Like, the pathway is about what you love, because if you find something that you love and want to do, and you try and work out how to put that into your career, then you'll be satisfied and you'll want to get up out of bed and go every day to work. That's the kind of job that you want, rather than I've got a physical injury, what can I do because I'm physically injured? Or I don't now want to face people, what can I do that's not facing people? They are things that start to give you the idea of what you're going to be more comfortable doing, and then it's working out what careers exist around that. That would be my advice in relation to that.
I would add to that. I love the personality piece that you raised, Ali. I think doing some work on your values and also on your strengths. There's a lot of free stuff online about strengths profiles and things. So really dig into strengths rather than focusing on the question was all about perceived weakness or perceived challenges. Let's turn it around, as Ali has suggested, and focus on personality and what suits, but also on strengths and what suits. In terms of anxiety, I have interviewed some of the most terrified humans on earth, I suspect. And one of the things that I say to people when I'm coaching them is there's no rules in an interview, really. You know, like you can take a notebook in with you with some notes in it, and you can say to the interviewer, when they say, how are you? Because everyone says that, right? To start that rapport building, etc. How are you? You know what? I'm actually really nervous. And watch them. Their demeanor, the interviewer's demeanor will change, and they will want to help you relax and feel better because they know they will get the most out of you if you are relaxed and feeling better. In terms of the remote piece and not wanting to be around people, completely get that. I'm currently on the New South Wales South Coast, loving the small village isolation kind of piece. If you have a look at job advertisements these days, LinkedIn has a new profile for location of job. The location is remote, or it's hybrid, or it's on site. And I have a quiet chuckle to myself because the applications for jobs that say they're on site are like really, really low, but the remote jobs are really popular. And so it's not so much of an issue that I don't want to be around people. Like let's turn that language around. Let's talk about, I would like to work remotely. I choose to work remotely. And so being more positive about embracing that as an opportunity for yourself.
And it might be what your family needs. You're often not the only person in this decision that's being made. That has to be factored in when you start thinking about careers and job opportunities, and you know the tools around that. You know, it's not as simple as just going to Seek and going, right, what jobs are available on Seek, or on I Work for New South Wales, where all the government jobs are listed. You've got to narrow what you and your family need to be happy and well, then tackle the job.
Absolutely. And you've both mentioned some really interesting comments there about what next and that link to networking and thinking forward. Love the comment on flipping that language, because I think it's so true that when we're in a space where we have been challenged or we're feeling the need for a change, we usually are deficit based. So we have to make a more conscious effort to go, okay, that's how I'm seeing it, but what else could be that perception, or why is that a good thing, and how is that helping me forward? So what are some practical tips you two would give to someone who's in the room saying, you know what, actually, I do want to start thinking about this. I haven't applied for something recently, or I hadn't been thinking about it. Where do I start? What would be those practical tips you guys would give? Maybe Desleigh, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Obviously a resume. You need to have your resume prepared. It needs to go to your strengths, and it needs to be in really plain language. So no jargon, no acronyms. I personally loathe acronyms. So the resume, make sure you spell check it. You know, I can't tell you how many resumes I get that haven't been spell checked, and I go, not good attention to detail. The other piece is your cover letter. You have roughly, depending on which article you read, you have roughly 60 seconds to get someone's attention in your cover letter. So make the links for them. Make sure that you tailor your cover letter at the very least, ideally your resume as well, but certainly your cover letter has to be targeted at the specific job. Use the language that they've got in their job advertisement, is another thing. So that's all about the actual application. I think separate to that with networking, I'm a member of the Human Resources Institute, as an example, and they always have free events for members. And so join an association or whatever it is for your area of expertise. You know, it might be a lot of first responders are amazing at training people because you've been training volunteers and training the general public or training colleagues. So Australian Institute of Training and Development, again, they will have networking events. So go to those and start talking to people and understanding the language that exists outside of your specific part of your career that you're in right now. They would be some of my top tips. Ali?
So I think you've got to get your toolkit together. What resources are you going to need? Because at any point you might need some or all of them. And that means getting professional career advice if you need it, especially if you're pitching for a higher level or a more senior role in management. Understanding your skills, and then what skills the potential employer is after. It will help you work out if the job is the right fit. Knowing who you are, and I think understanding that you are more than the identity that you were previously. So we have this banner behind me here is about our More Than a Cop campaign, which is reminding people that they're grandparents, but they're also leaders, or they're carers or decision makers, but they're also volunteers that might work at the surf club. So that's that information we had to make publicly accessible for our people that were struggling in the police, because when you're not then able to be at work and you're then having to try and come up with how you're going to make these next moves, if it's all on our internal systems and no one can access it, how can we then help people? So we actually created a transferable skills document where we took those elements for just the general rank of senior constable and then the rank of sergeant, and explained what those transferable skills are so that people can actually see them on paper. Oh, I am good at listening. Oh, I do, plan and prepare documents and all these kind of things. And it's taking the emotion out of it, looking at it more like a scientific approach. And preparation is key. You just have to remember, take time, prepare yourself, and breathing. Take a breath in and out, as we talked about before our presentation today, to just understand that you're human, and it's going to be a little bit of a rough road to get from, the job you've had so much comfort and probably a whole lot of, pleasure in doing over time, but it's no longer where you want to be.
And I think also going back to that, Team Catherine or Team Ali or Team whatever your name is, talking through your experiences with someone else who's not in the same line of work that you are can help you actually demystify it to other people, and that can help you with your language in whatever you put together to help you.
I love that you guys have commented on that, the toolkit, because often we don't know what needs to go into the toolkit, but you've really highlighted what I really believe in, and it's in preparing that resume, that cover letter, looking at those jobs, I'm actually getting to understand myself. I think sometimes we think all the answers should be there before we start applying, whereas what you're saying is actually in drafting that resume, I notice how much jargon there is and how many things no one else is going to understand what I'm saying. And so I need to reframe and to change that from that side. And I think you've also tipped on some really good points, that application in, as you say, I work for New South Wales or any of the government organisations, is a very, very different application process to a commercial or a corporate job. So what we're looking for are two different things. And it's not till we start looking that we actually can begin to understand what they're looking for, or what I think I bring to the table, which is really, really important. Very conscious we're running out of time, which I knew was going to be a problem for this discussion. But can I ask you guys a question that has come through is, how much do I have to share in the interview? How much do I need to tell?
So that's always a challenging one. And I think, HR people, line managers, they're just people at the end of the day, and we're all flawed. What you need to tell is anything that would impact your ability to do the job. So for instance, if I want someone who can run 100 meters in 10 seconds or whatever, then if you've got a broken leg, I need to know about that. I am recruiting engineers at the moment, for instance. If they have depression, I don't need to know about that. But they do need to go out onto remote and regional customer sites. And so if they can't travel for some reason, then I need to know about that. So yeah, I guess that's my benchmark. Anything that would impact the ability to do the job. And I also think it's really important to remember that most organisations will do pre-employment medicals now. And so you do have an obligation in that process to be open when you're asked the question.
Answering the question would be my advice. Be honest, answer the questions that are asked of you. And I would say share whatever you're comfortable to share, but don't overshare. The interview is about working out if you have the skills and capabilities to do the role, not, how much trauma you've been exposed to in the past and how you're going to cope in that role. But I think don't be afraid of building your capacity to work, especially if there's medical reasons that your capacity has been limited. Have conversations with the professionals that are also supporting you, whether that be your psychologists, psychiatrists, rehabilitation providers. If it's in that environment that you're coming out of, then you will be more well in your life and with your family and with your friends when you are working, but you will also be more happy if it's a role that you enjoy. So that would be my advice.
And when you accept yourself, because I find a lot of that is actually I need to accept myself for who I am here today and then decide how that relates, exactly as you ladies have said, how this relates to where I'm going. Had a couple of really excellent questions come through. One about that volunteer contribution, so particularly SES. A lot of the guys at the root, right, volunteering are involved and have amazing skills, very, very transferable into where we're wanting to hire. And there is a massive expansion at the moment. The question that's come through is actually, the volunteers are as valued, and I'm sure you, Desleigh, you would have seen that as well. Volunteering is equal to paid work now. There is no difference in that. And my volunteering that I do is equal to the paid work. But there can be issues where the application process requires a certificate or a formal qualification or that piece of paper that volunteer doesn't have yet because they've been volunteering. How would you guys say we can move past that? What would you respond to that?
You'll often see that it says, certificate for in training and development or equivalent experience. And so it's up to you to demonstrate that you have the equivalent experience. So the way I would approach it is if you're currently studying whatever area, put it on your resume and put, 2020 to present, or whatever the appropriate dates are, and tell them when it's going to be finished. I will always give people the benefit of the doubt because there's very few roles, medical roles are obvious, exceptions, but there are very few roles where a certification is literally a deal breaker.
Yeah, and I would say also consider what RPL, what recognised prior learning programs might be available to take the skills, unpack them with a professional and work out what that would equate to in a certification. Because I know for police, we have done that with a few people who have landed roles, and they've been very overwhelmed at how qualified they actually are when a professional has unpacked it that way and assessed against the education requirements what skills they would have. And keep your dossier together of those achievements in your career, like being able to articulate your accomplishments. That's what's key in selling yourself to somebody and the skills that you have.
Can I just add to that, to Ali's point? We're not always good at selling ourselves, and we need to get over that to progress in the interview process. And I had that feedback as recently as 10 days ago. Don't undersell your achievements. Tell me what you're most proud of. And so actually getting over that false modesty that many of us have is a good start. And practice. Spend time with friends and family and practice how you're going to respond to different questions that you could get.
And I think that gathering that information and keeping it together, Desleigh, you mentioned LinkedIn. For those who aren't on LinkedIn, who are online or dialing in, it's a really good way of keeping online. The amount of times I've worked with someone and they've emailed me and said, my hard drive's crashed, can you send me my resume and all of this, just so you're not recreating everything. But it also makes you consciously stop and reflect on what you're doing. Receiving affirmation, so feedback from people that wouldn't have otherwise given you feedback, and you're sort of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that kind of thing. So there are opportunities to build and collate that. Don't think you have to have it. The other comment I'd make is the government has released quite a lot of TAFE courses as COVID, so free courses through TAFE. If you haven't been learning for a while, or if you think you may need that piece of paper later, they can be a really good way of seeing if that learning environment works for you, getting something that you feel more comfortable with, and also projecting that you are happy to train, but sometimes you hadn't had the opportunity yet. So I find those parts can help, and definitely the recognised prior learning. Desleigh, did you have anything?
Yep. I would add, I'm a bit of a learning geek, right? Don't tell anyone except anyone who's watching or listening now. So have a look at edX, just literally EDX, and Coursera, because anything you want to learn, it's all available online and it's all free.
And there's comments coming through that unfortunately there are some people who don't value volunteers for all that they bring. I'd say unfortunately that's people. And so it's about those of us that are in a position of influence to make sure we recognise those people. I know in all of my roles I've hired a lot of volunteers, and I still look really fondly on people who are volunteering in different ways and at different times. So we're a completely volunteer organisation as Wellbeing Australia, and it may mean someone gives 1 hour a week. It may mean other people do, 2-3 days. It's whatever people can do. But that being able to connect is very important. Now, very conscious time is vanishing from us. So Ali, do you have any closing thoughts or comments you would like to make sure you share before we wrap up?
I just wanted to that last comment say that is out of your control, that people don't value first responders, and you can only control what you how you react to that. So we will pity them and pray for them, or whatever we need to do for them, but it doesn't devalue the contribution that you make when you're volunteering. So keep doing that. I just think it's important to know that as an organisation, we've had to reassess how we approach things. We had to listen to the people who we were impacting, the police who are impacted and need to make career changes, and we needed to adjust our approach to meet their needs. This is about supporting other police. My role has been, and my tip would be go to Google and just type in police career transition. I'm really proud that our website will come up fairly high up, and we've put a public facing section there around career transition. We've got an ability to look at your current rank and what that might align to a different grade in another organisation. We've got our transferable skills documents. We've got even a little booklet for people who like a tangible kind of more than a cop guide, where you can fill in sections of it. Now, you might not be a police officer, but you're welcome to download a copy. And if it helps you unpack your transferable skills for another role, make sure you email me and say, Ali, that was great. That really helped me, navigate that block that I was having. So I think we're not perfect. We don't do it right all the time, and I think everyone needs to remember you're not perfect, and it's going to be a journey that you're on.
And it's wonderful to see, because there has been a lot of feedback about police throughout the time, to see that breaking down, and across all the agencies we've seen those stigmas reducing, but the tangible solutions starting to embed. Desleigh, what do you think are the last closing comments you've got?
I would say trust your gut and explore your gut. Interviews are very much a two-way street at the moment. There is a bit of a challenge for companies recruiting at the moment, and so this is a great time to be looking for a role. But trust your gut. If your gut is saying they're not valuing my volunteer experience, is it really going to be the organisation that you want to be in? And for HR people, I think the best thing I ever did was educate myself about mental health conditions, and, taking a brave step and being courageous in having conversations that are perceived as being really risky, but having conversations with people and being as open and transparent as you can be, I think is really valuable.
Brilliant. Thank you, ladies. This, I know, is just the start of conversations. When I started working with Desleigh and Allyson in preparing for this, I was saying, I know this is going to be a big one and we can't fit it into an hour. So for those of you who are still watching, if you have questions or you think, hang on, I need to know more about, I don't understand what to do with this or any of those other areas, please could you add it to our survey that you have been given a link for and will be sent, so that we can continue this conversation. Today wraps up our presentation and panel series. It doesn't wrap up our summit as a whole for this year. We have a series of workshops that will be coming up to help everyone to continue to get really practical support in deepening their understanding, in creating action, and in moving forward. So some of the workshops that we have coming up are around values and ethics, which would be critical around starting to value those things that are most important to you if you feel that you are in a space that is not right. And that's with Mark Crosweller to continue his conversation from last year. We have Kerry Howard speaking with us about how to manage that, you know, dealing with the stigma and that fear of reprisal. What if I say this and then this happens to me? And she's fantastic at really helping us on that personal level, which flows so deeply into our professional world. And Graham Bint's talking with us about PTSD in terms of actually, this is how we move from trauma to actually thrive. We can have a future post PTSD, and it can be one that takes us to that next phase and stage, as we spoke about before. Now, if you are feeling that you or those that you love and are near and dear to you do need extra support or help, we urge you to reach out for help. On the screen are some support networks and resources that you are very, very welcome to reach out to. If you are stuck and unsure of where to go, please reach out to us at Wellbeing Australia and we will help to connect you with the right place to start to get that support. But there are a lot of fantastic resources and places to help everybody from that side. Ali has referred to a number of different resources from the police, which she has very kindly shared with us, and I will be sending them through to all of you so that you can access them as well. And Desleigh mentioned some books and some other areas as well, so I will make sure that I get those off her and share it through so that you have a bit of a cheat sheet or a go-to. There are a number of things we wanted to share, so we will make those resources accessible to you after. But just in terms of closing, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Ali and Desleigh for their candor, their honesty, and their sharing, because without people doing this, it's really a difficult thing for us to start that conversation. And there's been such strong feedback that we aren't talking enough about careers. We're not talking enough about the future for our first responders from all capacities. And that's why this conversation has been critical. So again, just please share in the feedback survey so we can continue to support you. This does wrap up those panels and presentations, and really strong themes that have come through for us were very much around connecting back with yourself. And that came through all of our sessions is we have to zone into what we are in control of. And so take that action rather than consuming ourselves in those things that we're not in control of. So let's make those justified decisions to improve our health overall. Very much starting to take that support network and see what's there. And the beautiful silver lining that I feel is the stigma is starting to break down. We have strong people in positions of influence and throughout organisations at all levels that are speaking about the importance of these conversations. And that really gives us hope and value around what we're doing and what we are wanting for you guys as a future. People like Shane Fitzsimmons, Carlene York, Andrew Chris, Paul Lloyd, various people across all agencies speaking out and advocating for you guys and for your health. We're very excited by, and we'll continue to have these conversations. So thank you all for joining us. It's been wonderful sharing and feedback, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.